Tonight, here on Retro Rangers, we are joined by our good friend Mike Sauter. We are talking about the television and some of the movie appearances of that famous detective, Nero Wolfe. I have to tell you, there's a lot to learn in this one. I am very excited to have you join us. And I almost got it right at the right point. There we go. Time for Retro Rangers.
Retro Rangers, Retro Rangers, Retro Rangers, Retro Rangers.
Hey, it's Capt'n John, and we are giving you Retro Rangers, the show where your friends and pals talk about old-timey TV and nostalgic stuff that is just so much fun in a life that is riddled with heavy feelings, and I don't know if I can deal with this. We are an oasis for you. I hope that's what we intend to be. You know, it's not just me. No. I couldn't run this space station all by myself. I, of course, have the best damn XO in the Federation. Folks, have you met Cmdr Joe Townsel?
Oh, greetings, everybody. How are you doing, Capt'n John? I know times remain challenging in your area, and as you say, if we can give everybody a little bit of a break from life's troubles, I'm thrilled to be able to be a part of that.
Speaking of which, so out here in Southern California, where I am, a little further up the coast, you'll find Mr. Townsel in his lovely area of the Golden State. But down here, of course, we had fires. Today, rain. Not a ton of rain. So it's a gentle sprinkling of rain. That's nice. I hope they're really things where the fires are near us have been going extremely well. Thank you, fire department. Oh my God. Yes. Firefighters are my favorite people in the whole world. And then immediately after, Retro Rangers.
It's a neck and neck race.
Raphael is here. Raphael said hello, but then he said matching black scarves.
Not exactly.
No,
matching robes.
These are robes, my friend.
Yeah.
And Diana J. Brody's with us. Yay for rain. Oh my God, that's a relief. And where is a nice hello from our good friend? He's feeling better. He has been sick lately. Our good friend Chris, better but not perfect. When have we ever been perfect? So yes, let me bring you the man that we promised you. He is one of our great friends, and he always brings such great affection for the subject. He is an aficionado of many subjects, and we love to bring him in. And today's subject, of course, being Nero Wolfe. Let's welcome Mr. Mike Sauter. Mike, thank you for joining us.
John, that introduction was satisfactory, Archie.
I have to say, I was somewhat familiar with the radio show, being a big radio, devotee. I was somewhat familiar with the radio show of Nero Wolfe, and hadn't really, had kind of breezed by the movies, the TV shows, and having done some sort of deeper dives, not the deepest dives. We have Mike for that. Oh my gosh, what a great setup for a detective mystery. Mr. Nero Wolfe, Archie Goodwin, depending on what you're watching, Fritz might be a bigger member of the cast. It's really good. And I'm going to throw this out here. This is something we were going to discuss in the green room before the show, but I forgot to bring it up, was YouTube is totally cool with us showing Nero Wolfe.
Thank goodness.
No problem. Which is great, because when I was, checking to see if the copyrights would be a problem, they aren't. I really watched and I really enjoyed, and the differences are stark between the different portrayals and the different approaches to Nero Wolfe, but still all of them I thought were very enjoyable. Have you found that, Mike?
Yes and no. And to explain that, is depending on how you go into it. If you're going into it and deciding to engage it on its own terms, there are a lot that are very enjoyable, a lot of adaptations. Because as you mentioned, there's the radio series that you were talking about was the Sydney Greenstreet series, but there
Yes.
were two sort of prior series to that, of which either like zero, I think of one of them, 0 episodes have survived of the first adaptation. I think only 1 episode survived of the second. And
That's
then there
right.
was much later Canadian CBC radio version that was fairly faithful to the books. Yeah, and a couple different TV adaptations. The key, though, is that some of them are basically using the characters, and that's it. If you watch the first feature film, Meet Nero Wolfe from 1936, I believe, that has a Archie, played by Lionel Stander, is being hounded
Lionel
through
Stander.
the whole.
Oh, wait, Lionel Stander from Heart to Heart?
Max from Heart to Heart, yes, who was
She's gorgeous.
woefully miscast as like sort of a, he's got that voice to begin with, but like he's playing a just kind of a dumbass New York, Archie. He's not, a smart guy like the actual Archie from the books are.
Right.
And but he's being hounded throughout the movie by a fiance that was invented for the screenplay, who is kind of in the sort of Cyndi Lauper, sort of high-pitched New York gal kind of voice. And so, if you're a purist, you're going to hate some of the things. I think one of the movies, there was a second feature film, and then Stout wouldn't agree to any more because he just could not stand what they did to the stories. Fritz was replaced by this kind of tough guy butler named Butch. So it's just strange. What? You can get really annoyed if you're a fan of the books, which I've been for quite a long time.
Right. Joe Townsel, you're a man of letters yourself, a celebrated author and a fantastic imagination. What is your take? How do you feel about Nero Wolfe?
Well, I have to be honest, gentlemen. As I explained to John just prior to going on air, Nero Wolfe is a character I know, or I am acquainted with. It is not. I mean, obviously, Mike Sauter is going to have a tremendous amount of knowledge over me on this topic and character.
That's why he's
here.
What
I know of the characters, I enjoy, especially as far as the so-called hard-boiled detective genre goes. And I'm looking forward to a great time watching our clips tonight because I know we got some good ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Mr. Sauter, where would you like? Well, actually, instead of asking you where you would like to begin, I am going to force you to begin explaining the premise of Nero Wolfe. What does someone need to know as they approach this subject?
Well, the sheer genius of author Rex Stout when he created the characters, and the first book came out in 1934. Fer de Lance was the first novel, and it was at a time when detective fiction was really kind of having an upswing, and the classic hard-boiled detective characters were really emerging and getting a lot of popular acclaim. And so what Rex Stout, he tried a couple of different detective stories and other short fiction that he had written, but his brilliance was basically taking the hard-boiled detective story and marrying it with Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes became, Sherlock Holmes is the brainy deduction guy. Yeah. He is a man of action, but he doesn't prefer that. He wants to just outthink everybody. And so Stout created Nero Wolfe as a very corpulent character who would just sit in his office in his tailor-made chair, and he wanted to just have the information brought to him, and he would figure it all out and bring everybody to get together in the classic kind of later Columbo style of like, let's bring everybody together so I can name who the killer is, and married that with the hard-boiled detective man of action, which is Archie Goodwin, his Nero Wolfe's employee and trusty sidekick, who would actually go out and do everything that needed to be done to bring all the information back to Nero Wolfe. And the characters were incredibly well written. They had such great quirks to them, and it was very entertaining fiction to read. The back and forth between them, because of course, one of the things constant throughout the whole series is Nero Wolfe. He loved the good things in life. He had 10,000 orchids in a greenhouse on his roof. He had a staff of 3 living in his house. He was a gourmand and would love to eat, incredibly fanciful meals. But he only wanted to work just enough to sustain his lifestyle. And so one of Archie's key jobs was to needle him into taking jobs to be able to increase the bank balance. So, they always had this great tension back and forth, and great repartee. So it was a terrific premise and it very well sustaining through all the books and novellas and the adaptations that came from them.
That I must agree. One of the greatest things that Rex Stout built into the entire premise was the tension. Now, literally, Archie is the secretary for Nero Wolfe.
Secretary, bookkeeper. Besides being a detective, I mean, if Nero Wolfe wasn't in New York, he would still be among New York City's best detectives. In world, so to speak, in canon. I mean, he's a great detective on his own, but a little younger, a little more impulsive, and he would file all the orchid index cards with all the things that when they were trying to breed new orchid variations or whatever. So he basically did a lot, and a lot of the just office stuff, in addition to being the man of action.
Now, this takes place in Manhattan. Nero Wolfe owns a brownstone, I believe, and I can't remember if it's East or West 35th Street.
I believe it's West 35th Street, and I believe it's been multiple street numbers have been given in different books, but I think the ones most commonly used would actually put it in the river, in the Hudson River. It's a street address that doesn't really exist.
Now, you personally, how did you first approach Nero Wolfe? Was it through the books or through the radio shows? Because I know you're very well versed in books, but you actually know radio shows pretty well too.
It was the books. I don't know. I don't remember how I came across it, because I think I had discovered Sam Spade and Dashiell Hammett's books, and so I was looking for other things, and I think I moved into Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe, and then from that I think I was just trying to find more. And it's funny because I'm not really much of a mystery fiction kind of a person. I might have hit Nero Wolfe, and then I just kept reading more of those, and there are a lot of them. Rex Stout lived to 88, and he was producing books basically every year, or at least a novella every year. And so there's a lot out there. And I was very happy during the pandemic. That was one of my big things. I finally was able to complete my collection of all the Nero Wolfe books. So yeah, that's how I just stumbled across it. I think just from the other hard-boiled detective guys.
Now,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to interject something there real quick. Again, I admit at the top of the show, I'm not super familiar with the character of Nero Wolfe and Archie, but I have learned quite a bit just in the last couple of months. I mean, John had a really entertaining Webble mystery with an episode of Nero Wolfe not long ago. And in my own research for just preparing for tonight's show, from a writer's perspective, I do quite enjoy all the layers of Nero Wolfe. I mean, Mike Sauter mentioned many of them already, But the fact that he just said, you know what, just bring it to me. I like my gourmet food. And I have to ask, Fritz is the chef, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So there's Fritz, who I know brings his own charm to the story and to the scenario. He likes to tend to his orchids. And these are just all the nuances of a really fleshed out character. Not just him, but everybody, his supporting cast, which I really enjoy in knowing a character and his minions, so to speak.
There are constant parallels drawn to the great detective himself, Sherlock Holmes. And as Mike mentioned much earlier, one of them is that they are both consulting detectives.
Right.
They're detectives that you will go to wrench their brain for a little while with your mystery. And I do also love that Archie he's more like the Sam Spade or the Philip Marlowe. He's the leg man. He puts in the shoe leather. He meets the dames. He drinks the booze.
He drops the bon mot when a gun is pointed at him.
Chris wants to know, does Nero Wolfe sell the orchids? Because that makes for good money.
No, actually, Wolfe has never sold a single orchid. He gave them away at times, sometimes impulsively, but mostly it had some kind of meaning. Like if you did him a solid of some kind, he might, send a bunch of orchids your way, but he never sold them. He would sometimes trade them, I believe, there was an orchid grower on Long Island that he would sometimes deal with, and other orchid people from around the globe. I think one of the books dealt with a giant orchid show in New York City that he actually ventured out of his home to go to, and that started the mystery in that particular storyline. But yeah, he never sold them.
Now, Mike, I have a really stupid question for you, and I don't want to forget it, even though it is stupid.
Oh, go for it.
Is Rex Stout by chance a pen name? Because it sure seems fitting for a character like Nero Wolfe.
Right? I know. No, I believe his name was Rex Todd Hunter, I think was his middle name, Stout. So I believe that was his real name. But he started off writing for a lot of fiction, for a lot of magazines, and he actually decided he didn't want to do the hustle and bustle of like the freelance writer kind of thing. So he actually set writing aside for a while, and he wanted to raise enough money doing business pursuits to allow him to be able to just be a writer only. And he actually came up with some educating kids about the banking system thing, and he would go out to schools and people would hire him to do these talks and teach kids about the banking system. And he actually made a decent amount of money from that, and so he launched his career just solely as a novelist after he had raised enough money. It was a very he was a quirky as his characters were so well fleshed out. I think probably because he was such a kind of a weird, I don't know if let's say weird. He was a quirky character himself, and so he was able to inject a lot of that into his writing.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of characteristics of mine in a lot of my characters. I certainly understand that, and as you were describing, I was definitely picking up on some of the parallels between author and character.
He was very particular in a lot of things. And that was injected into Nero Wolfe. For example, in one story, it was told Archie is the narrator of the stories. He's the one writing them, kind of like Holmes in the Sherlock, or sorry, Watson in the Sherlock Holmes stories was the chronicler of the great detective, and Archie was nominally the writer of all these stories, with Rex Stout being the self-styled literary agent for Archie Goodwin. But Archie's always throwing in little tidbits of backstory that sometimes are just tantalizing. He'll make references to previous cases that were never featured in a book, or little incidents like one time Nero Wolfe burned a dictionary page by page in the front room fireplace because I believe it was that it suggested that to infer and to imply could be used interchangeably. So he burned the entire book. So that directly comes from Stout, because he was very particular in his approach to words and life.
And there is that element of his own life where he was a bit of an entrepreneur, and lecturing school children about the banking system. The backstory for Nero Wolfe is that he lived a life of action. He traveled the world. He had many vocations, and then he finally settled and became really big and heavy, and used his brain and his considerable experience in the world. He was literally a worldly man.
He not only was he a huge food fanatic, and you think that's why he was a very large man, most frequently described as a seventh of a ton in weight by Archie, although his weight is given at various amounts over the course over different books. But he said in the backstory in one book, talking about his own backstory, he moved around a lot. He said he killed 200 Germans in World War II. He was involved. He was a spy for Austria before World War II. He did a lot of things that were alluded to in various books, but he said that he realized, essentially, this is just paraphrasing, he realized that he probably wouldn't survive too long if he kept his lifestyle of moving around. So he decided to get into a situation where he just wasn't moving around as much for his own safety.
I think it's time we start watching some clips. I've pulled together various clips for this. And again, thank you, Rex Stout, presumably. Thank you, everyone who has made material for and about Nero Wolfe, because we got a lot to choose from here. All right, first we're going to start off with this clip from mysteriouspress.com. I'm going to be sure to give them a like. I thought this might be a little overview. Let's take a look.
I read Nero Wolfe for the first time, and I got hooked very quickly on these stories. Set in an old brownstone in Manhattan with this overweight private detective, genius who loved good food and raising orchids, and we'd be reading 3 books at any one time, and his sidekick, the rather smart alecky Archie Goodwin, who would go out and dig up the clues and bring in the suspects and present them to the great man. One of the geniuses of Rex Stout was he could make all of these suspects equally believable as the killer. Nero Wolfe peels back the layers of the mystery. So Inspector Kramer of New York Homicide is right there in the room when Wolfe says, "That's the guilty party."
You'll pay for this, Wolfe. Mr. Kramer, I've seen enough of him. Get him out of here. Let's go.
Improbable? Yeah, it is. But it makes wonderful reading, and only the genius of a guy like Rex Stout, to my mind, could pull that off so well. These are pure mysteries in which the mystery has to be solved in more clear-cut ways, and they involve the personalities of the people more than anything that is of a scientific nature. Reading a Nero Wolfe book, to me, is like slipping on a very comfortable pair of shoes that just slide on, and you just let the story then carry you along. You're in that world, you're in that brownstone. You're in that office lined with bookcases with a giant globe of the world over in one corner. You just have a comfortable feeling.
Is that it? Oh, that's it. Okay. That's really
great overview.
Robert Goldsboro, I guess.
Robert, if I could jump in, Robert Goldsboro, I believe, is the gentleman who took over writing new Nero Wolfe books after Stout died. I have never read any of his, but
I like his take, but I think I like his take on it because, Mike, it's so similar to yours.
Well, great takes.
And let me also say that of the clips they are showing, as I was going through the various clips that we could look at today, there was one I kept running into that is an Italian TV series of Nero Wolfe done entirely in Italian. There's very little about it that I could take in. I mean, I can read the translations, but it's kind of funny how sort of low budget it is and how it's supposedly done, in the period, but it's like nobody's hair or makeup looked like that in the 40s or the 30s.
Kind of like Happy Days, huh?
Well, one of the really interesting things about the Wolfe series, the book series, because it started in 1934, and I forget when the last a novel was published, but it was not too long before Stout died in 1975. There was such a huge range of what was contemporary for the Nero Wolfe stories.
Right.
The backstory of Archie Goodwin and Nero Wolfe are pretty fuzzy, just because what was logical in 1934 about their ages and therefore when they were born is very different, because they never aged throughout the whole. They didn't, because that would have been ridiculous too. It would have been 40 years later after the first novel when the last novel came out, and so it just totally kind of kills the timeline. Canonically, you can't make it work.
As a matter of fact, we're going to now see an interview with William Conrad, who was one of the famous fat detective actors.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this as a heavy man. I say this, almost an eighth of a ton myself. So I know. Or 7.
Everybody do the math real quick.
I'm Christmas really fattened me up. But anyway, yeah, it's Christmas's fault that I ate so much chocolate. But what was interesting about the William Conrad NBC version was that it was set in modern time. Modern, and I believe Los Angeles, but I don't know. I'd have to go a little deeper. It did not look like New York to me.
I think it was set in New York, but it was the low budget way of New York, where an establishing shot and then just streets of LA.
This was before they did the A&E version of it, which is so Canadian that I kind of love it, because me, I love Canadian television. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at this interview. It's as you can see, it's kind of rough VHS, but it is pure William Conrad. William Conrad at this point. I feel like this is pre-Jake and the Fat Man, but post-canon.
I think so.
That would make sense.
Yeah, let's take a look.
81. Well, 81 was the show.
Speed in 5.
Raw tape.
All right, let's take 5, 4, 3, 2.
The ladder of success is never crowded at the top, and at the top of the acting profession is the gentleman with me now, William Conrad of NBC's new show called Nero Wolfe. And Mr. Conrad, tell us about Nero Wolfe. I'm excited about what I saw.
Well, thank you. We're excited about it, too. Nero Wolfe is a character written in something like 50 or 60 novels by a man by the name of Rex Stout. And Nero Wolfe is an obese, if you'll excuse the expression, detective who never leaves his house. He has a brownstone in New York City, and he grows orchids.
That's right.
And he has a lake man who goes out and gets all of his information for him and brings him back to him. And he, being supposedly the brightest of all intellectual detectives, puts everything together and solves the case. That basically is what it's all about.
You've done so many things, and acting and producing and directing, and the original radio voice of Matt Dillon, the Gunsmoke, of course, everyone knows Cannon. How have you changed in your career as an actor over all these years?
I don't really think I've changed at all. Perhaps I have. I don't know, but I've never. Nobody ever asked me that question before. That's a good question. I really don't know. Have I changed? You can tell me. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm fascinated by the character Nero Wolfe. About the cerebral part of him, I guess, excites me. And from what I saw, I'm going to be trying with you to solve the crime as the show goes along.
Well, that's always fun, you know, to have what they call a closed mystery instead of an open one. An open one is where everybody knows who done it, and they watch the detective track it down and let him find out. In a closed one, nobody knows who done it, except the detective is the first one to find out, and he lets everybody know in the last act. But those are always much more fun than the open one, and that's what this is, the closed.
Sure. What has success given you, and what has it taken away?
Oh, it's given me an awful lot of things. It's given me enough money to not do things I don't want to do. It has given me a nice home and capability of doing things for people. The only thing that it's done in the way of taking away is perhaps
you get
your privacy.
Yeah, you get hassled every time you go to Trader
Once
Vic.
you become a personality, well, it's difficult to go to the supermarket without somebody stopping you and
there you go, John.
Or to a baseball game. I haven't been to a baseball game in years, and I love baseball because of that. Because you either end up signing autographs all during the game, or getting into fights with people because you say, I don't want to be rude, but I don't. You know, I came to watch the game. You can't win one way or the other, so you just don't go. So that's the only negative to the whole thing, as far as I can see. I wish it were possible to do your work and then go home and be totally anonymous, but that is not possible. So.
From what I saw, Nero Wolfe will not be anonymous, and I feel the vibes of a good show, and we're anxious to watch it.
Thank you. I hope you all like it, too.
William Conrad, this is Frank Bissoni in Los Angeles.
I was going to ask about Burt Convy.
Oh, man, that hair helmet. That's a wow, boy, Frank. But hey, that's what you looked like back in the day when you wanted to get on the television. Mike Sauter, any reaction to that interview with Mr. William Conrad?
Well, I agree with Barry in the comments about that one button fighting for its life there. Also appears to have been misbuttoned. You just love the days when a TV star could go on TV smoking a cigar with their sweater misbuttoned. Nobody seemed to care.
It's like he was dressed by Steve Bannon.
Well, it does lend a little bit to the casual nature of the conversation. Makes it a little bit more like you're just having a little chat with Bill. Which is
I feel like they've met before. I feel like those two guys have met before, and what a great job the interviewer did of making everything look exciting. Of course, Diana J. Brody says the interviewer looked like a cross between Bill Bixby and Burt Convy. Well, that's pretty much the perfect 1970s on-screen star right there. Would be
if only we had that the Magician and Tattletales crossover. I do have to say, one of the things, there have been so many different, I mean, not, a huge number, but like 6 or more different actors over the years who did play Nero Wolfe and the same amount as Archie Goodwin, and 2 movies, a handful of TV adaptations and a couple of radio adaptations. And they all have their charms in a certain way. I mean, I think William Conrad, he's got that gravitas, he's got that amazing voice, but he kind of comes off as a little too serious. I mean, Wolfe, for being like a really smart guy, like Sherlock Holmes, he did have a flair for the dramatic, he always liked to do the big reveal of who the murderer was, and he found it very enjoyable. And you don't really get the sense of, it's like William Conrad is kind of like approaching the character like he's always eating his vegetables,
Yeah.
he's doing it like he's gotta, not because he wants to. And that I think was kind of lost in that version. Although Lee Horsley, who in that series played Archie Goodwin, I think he's pretty decent, even though Lee Horsley was kind of that sort of generic hunky guy of that period of time.
They definitely had the permanent wave going. I remember that.
Yeah, for sure. But I think he was pretty decent, because the thing about Archie is he was a man of action. He had to be a tough guy, but he was also very likable, like the lovable rogue kind of a character. And I think he kind of, I won't say nailed it, but I think he came within the mark.
We'll just take a look. The intro.
I guess.
I'm sorry, that's like Mork and Mindy music.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
What the?
Oh yeah, there's
Lee
the
Horsley, who later became, what was his ripoff of Magnum?
I know what you're talking about. It kind of escapes me. Audience, somebody.
It's like JJ Starbuck or something like that. Something ridiculous. There's Lee Horsley doing all the stunts. Well, he and the stunt.
Archie, you be my legs, and I'll be the brains.
And Alan Miller,
Miller,
that's Inspector Kramer. Wow,
yeah,
it looks pretty good.
Well, I do have to say, Saul Panzer, George Weiner as Saul Panzer was woefully miscast, because Saul Panzer is supposed to be like, he's really the top detective in New York. Archie would say that if he ever wanted, if Saul ever wanted Archie's job, he could probably get it in a heartbeat, because he's just like, but he's a very unassuming kind of guy. You would never know that he was like a super smart detective who could tail anybody and do whatever. And George Weiner, I remember him, I think he was a judge or a lawyer on Hill Street Blues in a recurring character.
Yes.
And just no way that you could, he really was, he couldn't pull off that, like, I'm really, the best detective in New York kind of a thing.
Raphael, thank you. It was Matt Houston. I was reaching for Matt Houston.
Now, this one was the one you mentioned, guys, that was set in the current day at the time, the 70s or what have you.
Yes.
And I think it probably suffered as a result. Just judging alone on the theme song. I mean,
what do you think of that, Mike? Because I agree with Joe there.
I mean, the theme song is terrible for a show like that. You're right. I mean, it does sound like a something that really should be in a domestic comedy or something like that. But
how did Mr. Belvedere not get that?
Right? It's just, it's awful. But I mean, I don't think the show suffered by being set in the modern day, because most of the plots, you only need to tweak them a little bit at that time to make them work in the modern day. They weren't, I mean, it was very timeless, a lot of the plots. I mean, sure, you couldn't set any mystery from back then. It would be very hard to set in the actual modern day in the past, like 25 years, just because so many things, cell phones kill, 50% of any kind of like mystery or drama or suspense, because, a lot of it is based on the fact that you need to get to somewhere or talk to somebody, and you need to go there, oh no, I have to warn so-and-so. Well, pick up your cell phone.
I think what I'm reacting to is, not just the theme song, but from the intro, is that it's so contemporary, and I'm going to kind of put it on Lee Horsley, not knowing any better, but too much of a 70s vibe. I mean, we've got like Lee Majors. You might as well cast him if he wasn't already doing $6 Million Man. I mean,
let's start talking about the casting, because I have to agree. Lee Horsley, are you kidding me? Like, he's such a well-coiffed, spent a lot of time in the hair chair. William Conrad doesn't have a big head of hair, so Lee got all the hair ladies working on him. And, of course, there's that idea that you need like the sexy man in your, late 70s, early 80s show. Yeah, I don't think Horsley was a good choice at all. Not a bad actor, but I do picture Archie Goodwin being different. You, Mike, how do you feel?
I don't know if I fully agree. I mean, Archie was he was a well-dressed man in the books. He was, he loved to go dancing with the ladies. He really would always be very well put together. As Rex Stout wrote him. So I think he kind of fits in with the 70s man in a lot of ways.
True. Good point.
Interesting. Okay, well, Diana J. Brody asks the question, did Orson Welles ever play Nero Wolfe, or am I just putting him in that world due to the weight of them both?
No, that actually is, it was, I think, obvious that Orson Welles was perfect to play Nero Wolfe. And he, we did mention at the top that they tried to get him. Eventually what became the William Conrad show initially was going to be a TV movie or miniseries starring Welles, but they never were able to work that out. And as a matter of fact, even I never knew that as a kid, but when I was reading the books, and I mentioned this to John recently, that my dream casting late 70s, early 80s would have been Orson Welles as Wolfe and Harrison Ford as Archie Goodwin, because, you got to have somebody. I mean, like later on with the A&E series, it was very true to the books, and they really took pains to try to make them, and they were very well done. Yeah. The movies were made. What was it? Timothy Hutton, who was Archie Goodwin in that, and his passion for the project really helped to make that happen, because he was a good name for that, for an A&E series at that time. But I just never bought that, this guy was he was streetwise. He could play the wisecracking part of it well, but like, I just never got away from Timothy Hutton that he was going to be able to like disable some thug, take away his gun, that aspect of the character you really have to have. And so you have to somebody who can be that, telling a great, dropping the funny line with a smirk, but also being able to be that real man of action.
I think there's a big missed opportunity in terms of bad timing. Now, what do you think of this, guys?
Yeah.
Archie Goodwin, David Hasselhoff. Huh?
It can work.
I'll allow it. I like it. It's not mine. It's not my pick. I have a pick, and I actually can get there from here in kind of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of a way. When I did finally, in the build up for this show that we're doing, I did finally watch a Nero Wolfe mystery, which was the A&E series. Mm-hmm. And I had always said Timothy Hutton was a terrible choice. I never thought he was a good choice. And yet I really enjoyed him. He really bought his way into my heart. But here's who I would have chosen for the Orson Welles guy. Timothy Hutton was in a movie called Turk 182.
Oh, yeah.
He played the younger brother of a character played by Dan Urich. I think Dan Urich. Now, granted, he was doing really well at the time. He was playing Dantana in Vegas. He didn't need a job, but I think he would.
Sorry, John, you're referring to Robert Urich. I just want to make sure.
My God, Robert Urich. Thank you, okay. Robert Urich.
Want to make sure I was understanding.
I just came up with it, so it's not fully formed, but yeah. Although I have to say, Hasselhoff is. I think, especially at that time, he would have been a good choice.
Well, maybe it's less comical in my mind if we go with the Baywatch Nights Hasselhoff. The year he was a PI himself.
Right. But Mike, you had a choice, and Harrison Ford, I think, is a good choice. But I am not a huge Harrison Ford fan. Because here's the thing: when I do my Harrison Ford imitation, I don't think of that as a guy who's a very good actor. He's just somebody who says lines. Kid, I don't know about ancient religions. All I know is a good blaster by your side. Huh. I'm the president. Get off my plane.
I think you are unfairly biased by the narration version of Blade Runner. Because from the story goes, and I don't know if this is actually true, but the story goes that everyone hated the narration on the creative side, but the studio wanted it because they didn't think audiences were going to be able to follow it. And so he intentionally did a bad job thinking they'd be like, well, we can't include this. And then whoops.
Well, I have to say, I do love that Raphael made the connection that Tim Hutton is the son of Jim Hutton, who portrayed Ellery Queen. Of course, Ellery Queen is going to be on Mr. Weber's Webo Mystery this week. And Jim Hutton did a great job.
Maybe that had something to do with his casting.
Maybe. Barry says I would have included Pat Harrington Jr.
Now, wait a minute.
Now we're just talking about the deep end with Schneider. Come on.
That would be that's more in the Lionel Stander area of Archie Goodwin, I think.
Still, Lionel, boss, we gotta go make some money, boss.
Oh, if you want to, you just I urge you. It's on YouTube. Meet Nero Wolfe is the title of it. It's an adaptation of the very first Nero Wolfe novel, just 2 years after the book came out, and it has Lionel Stander with his kind of crazy deep voice, just being this, I don't know, Mr. Wolfe, what should we do kind of thing. And then like every 5 minutes there's this like, well, when are we gonna get married, Archie? I know that's sounding like All in the Family all of a sudden.
Archie.
Yeah, I know that, but it was, it's not, it's actually an entertaining movie in and of itself. However, it just doesn't work for the characters ultimately.
But by contrast, just based on the little overview we saw at the beginning, looks like there's been some really inspired casting choices for Nero himself over the years. I reacted to like Larry Drake. I don't want to spoil because we're getting to it, but some interesting actors in there.
They really, especially on the A&E series, like oh gosh, what's his name? I always think of him as being a much bigger actor than the role.
Maury Chaykin.
Well, Maury Chaykin is a really interesting choice because Maury Chaykin was not an incredibly well-known actor. Saul Rubinek is one of the leg men. And that's an interesting thing that I found in the A&E series was that they opened it up to Archie is a leg man, but they have operatives. And then they follow the operatives as well. Tell us about that, Mike.
Yeah, they had, there were a whole, they would need to pull in more than just Archie. And so there was a whole, canon and lore about, some of these other people. I mean, it's like I mentioned, Saul Panzer was like the main guy that they would bring in when they needed something done. But there was a couple of other characters. There was this guy, Fred Durkin, who was like a big, beefy guy, but not very smart. Ori Cather, who was a ladies' man himself and thought he was should deservedly have Archie's job. And there was actually a female detective, Doll Bonner, who early on, Rex Stout did a Doll Bonner novel. So there's actually a story that's just her. And then that was not successful or as successful in the same ballpark as Nero Wolfe. So he never did anything more with her on her own, but then he started bringing her into some of the Nero Wolfe stories when they needed to have a female operative. They'd hire her.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, one of the things that I loved about the character that Saul Rubinek plays, because in my mind, Saul Rubinek's a big star. Like he can do stuff. And he did a lot of like undercover work. He did a lot of like playing characters. And it felt, that level of it felt so much like the movie The Sting. Because you've got all of these people who have all these skills, you put them together in this ensemble. It really, part of it for me is, well, I understand that A&E was doing these movies, they're like 90-minute movies or 2-hour movies, 90 minutes worth of programming, half an hour of commercials. And that's just smart. You know, the radio shows are a half hour, and it's pretty much Archie, Nero, the client, the suspects. Now we have to figure out who did what and who done it. You got a longer form, you need more people. That was my impression. I don't know. Does that seem like a good estimation, do you think, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. There were the first two radio adaptations that were made just used the characters only, and they were all original stories. The one surviving episode from either of those two series, it's just it has nothing, very little bearing to do with the characters as Stout wrote them. But the Sydney Greenstreet radio show, yeah, you're right. I mean, they did base them loosely on some of the Stout stories, but it was pretty basic because you didn't have time to get into much.
Well, one thing I'm already enjoying about about Archie Goodwin is that he was a leg man for Nero, and he was a leg man in his romantic life as well.
he really was.
Character.
And I guess we can't really go any further before we should probably take a moment to acknowledge that the greatest failing of the entire series is that there really was various kinds of misogyny on display over the course of the series. Everybody in the household basically had some issues with women in some way, shape, or form. I mean, Nero Wolfe thought women just were hysterical and made him uncomfortable, although he did have a lot, there were women that he truly respected and liked. But Archie was very much a ladies' man, but he kind of saw women that way. And Fritz, the cook, he always got nervous when there were women in the house because he always thought Nero was going to get married and he'd get kicked out of a job. So that there was definitely that awkwardness to the whole canon that we have to acknowledge. But that said, in one of the early novels, they introduced a character named Lily Rowan, who was like a wealthy woman about town who she loved. She just became very amused by Archie, and then she started to appear here and there, and especially in later books, she was. I don't know if she was quite a steady girlfriend for Archie, but definitely would appear very frequently.
Shall we add to our dream casting, gentlemen, for Fritz?
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay, does that work?
Gordon Ramsay and a big mustache, like a Kaiser, kind of a mustache. I don't know if he could do a German accent, but
I was always, when I was a kid, I was influenced by pop culture of the time, but I always saw in my dream casting, I always pictured someone like a John Gielgud type. But the thing is, he's Swiss. So he's not like a British butler cook, he has to be, so I believe in the William Conrad, it was George Voskovec who played Fritz, who was also, he was in 12 Angry Men. He was one of the jury.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool. I love the actor who plays him in the Maury Chaykin version, but I can't remember the guy's name. He's done a lot of soap opera stuff, but he was also the scientist character in Psi Factor, Tales of the Paranormal.
Oh, Psi Factor.
Chronicles of the Paranormal. So, of course, I love him. Let's take a look at some more video. Right. We are now looking at... do you feel ready, Mike, for the Rex Stout interview with Dick Cavett, or would you like to try something else?
We could do that. Whatever you feel.
Okay.
Surprise us. So.
All right. Well, in terms of length of things, this is probably the best one to go to now. So here we go. This is, and by the way, this is the first time I'd ever watched any Dick Cavett show in my life. Oh my God, what a great show this was. So big fan of this clip. So let's take a look. This is Rex Stout on Dick Cavett. Please excuse me. once again, I have done that thing where I start showing it, but I'm not sharing it. So,
But those answers
showing,
are
not
becoming
sharing.
increasingly rare. Kudos, John.
let me. There we go, and there we go. If I didn't do this, would it even be a Weber internet thingy?
Oh, I'm on. No one told me. My next guest invented.
There's the original John Weber.
Possibly more famous than his creator. Nero Wolfe is a super sleuth, as you know. He's supposed to be the best detective in the world, lives in a brownstone on West 35th Street, and he's in a class with himself, like the masters from Sherlock Holmes to Monsieur Dupin and all of those cats. Rex Stout is quite a colorful figure in his own way, the creator of Nero Wolfe. He's president of the Authors League of America, a man of many commitments. Gourmet cooking is one of his specialties. And in current biography, I noticed that he was born in 1886. I'm happy to report he's still going strong. There's a new Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe, out now. Will you welcome a prodigious and prolific gentleman, Rex Stout?
That walk-on music.
Did not even picture him this way.
No.
Is that Eartha?
No.
You just had her on last
I
week.
meant to
William
have it
Holden
here for you, but slipped my mind. Do you ever resent the fact that certain critics feel that your form, the mystery, is a minor form of literature? I know Edmund Wilson wrote a piece called "Who Cares Who Killed Roger Ackroyd" or something like that.
Well,
does that bother you?
Well, how did you know that he wrote that before you were born? I think that was a long while ago.
I've lied about my age.
Well, that attitude to mystery stories is just one form of snobbery, and you don't argue with snobs. They're just snobs, that's all.
I see. Hope you're watching, Wilson. How many Nero Wolfes are there now? I know there's a list about that long, but I don't know how many are in it.
Well, there are 34 book-length stories and 36 or 7 shorter ones.
How do you plot them out? That's what I guess everybody would like to know. Whenever you read one, there's always a dilettante feeling of what fun it would be to write one of these. But when you get down to it, I'm sure it would be very, very hard. Do you know where you're going and when you start out?
When I start, I haven't the faintest idea.
Really?
I know one or two things about the story, but what they're actually going to say, no, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are any kind of a story, a detective story or any other kind. There are really two ways to do it. One is to have an idea about who your people are and the kind of things they're going to do, and then sort of let them take over.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few of the best storytellers have told stories that way, but others will write a complete outline, 20,000 words of the whole thing, giving every little piece of action, everything but the dialogue. Well, it isn't so. I think that one way is better than the other. It just depends on how you like to do it.
But you will sometimes write yourself into a corner and then see how you can get out of it.
Do you play chess?
No, I don't.
Well, once in a while, playing a game of chess, you'll get yourself in a corner. But if you're any good at all, you won't do that. No, I don't write myself in.
I love that. I love his reaction. I also love the wink.
Yes.
Have you ever seen any interviews before, Mike, with the great author Rex Stout?
I have. Yeah, I've seen this one and a couple of others. And yeah, he can come across as being very, it's funny he says it about snobs because he can come across a little snobby about certain things. I think later on in this interview, they get into his work for trying to extend copyright for authors.
Oh, right. Yeah, he does
pretty heavily. And he, like I said earlier, he's very firm in his opinions about various things. And, sometimes he comes across as not very, like it might not be, I guess what I'm trying to say is watching an interview with him, at the end of it, it's like, would I want to be a dinner guest where he was also there? Because it could go either way. It could be absolutely enchanting, or it could be like, I want to get out of here. So
speaking of authors, so Chris, who is a writer himself, says, when I have an idea, I have to find my ending. When I do, I outline backwards from that point, then write the story forward from there. How do you feel about that, Joe Townsel?
Well, I'm glad you asked, John. I mean, I definitely relate to Chris and Rex Stout here. When I sit down to write a story, and as I go through it, I almost never know what's going to happen. It may sound hoity-toity to some, but
yeah.
I feel that my characters will take on a life of their own. They begin with a life of their own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just there to put pen to paper, so to speak. And I'm always very pleasantly surprised at the outcomes because it is their story, not mine.
Isn't that interesting? When your characters are so strong, the little bit of writing that I do find that too. A lot of times I just sit back and watch the characters do what they do, share how they share or don't. And there's always a little bit of a mystery as to how it's going to end up. But how do we feel about the comparison to playing chess?
I think it was great. I think a great response.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I was thinking the same thing before he said it himself, if I may make that claim.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was a perfectly fine question from Cabot, but you don't let yourself get there. And if you do, it may not be worth finishing anyway.
Right.
There's an analogy that one can say or bring up from the Beatles about writing songs where John Lennon and Paul McCartney would sometimes come up with a song and not write it down. And the ones that the next morning they couldn't remember, they felt like, well, they weren't really that good to begin with because I can't remember it. So the ones that you remember the next day without writing it down are the ones that stick with you.
Well, that's very a lot of wisdom in that, but I don't trust myself. I write it down.
I mean, that is the miracle.
We should say that there's not one right way or wrong way to do it. And I think Stout is not, he was pointing out right there that some people do elaborately plot everything out except the dialogue when they're going in to write it. And that's a legitimate way of doing it for some people. It's just, and I agree with you, Joe. Like if I don't write it down, if I don't email it to myself an idea, then forget about it. It's gone. No matter how good it was.
I mean, what a wonderful thing to be Lennon and McCartney and to be so prolific.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember a line from an interview that Paul did where he said like, oh, when we first got together, we wrote like 100 songs. They're all gone. Like no one can remember them. It's like you threw away 100 Lennon and McCartney songs. Holy cow. But yeah, that's part of your process. Okay.
Well, they're obviously looking for the creme de la creme as well. I mean, I'm sure a lot of those that they lost would have been very worthwhile, but obviously not the classics that others are destined to be. So
right.
It's like Bob Dylan in his early years. He would just bang out song lyrics on a typewriter. No pencils with erasers for him. Just go in, just right out on a typewriter, and maybe change a couple things around here and there, but sometimes the first draft is pretty damn good for if you're of that level.
All right, here we go back into this interview.
Into a corner.
You don't.
When I was 7 years old, living on a farm in Kansas, I painted myself into a corner of the kitchen, and that taught me a lesson.
Not to live in Kansas.
No, not to live in Carolina.
Right. We'll get postcards about that. I know you're sore about the copyright laws, and I didn't find out why. Here's my chance.
Oh, Lord, how much time have we got?
Mo, take 10 seconds.
Good.
No, we have time.
No, the copyright law in this country, our domestic copyright law, was passed in 1909, 60 years ago. And it says that if I build a house or make a table or make a chair, then it's mine. Yeah. It's mine for good. If I die, I leave it to whomever I want it. But if I make a book, it's only mine for 28 years.
How'd they come up with that number?
Because, I don't know. Probably pull it out of a hat.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's different now.
It's got to be longer now.
It is longer now, in part because of Stout and some other authors the efforts that they put in. But yeah, it is longer now.
I think it's like the author's death plus. For some reason, I have 70 or 75 years in my head.
Somewhere up in that area, I believe.
It's worth looking up, but yeah, there has been some reform about that. I mean, 20-something years is not a long time for your stuff to exist.
No. And there must be even not caveats, but caveats around that. Because, for example, how does J.D. Salinger's estate so successfully restrict his work from ever being adapted in any form?
Yeah. There's when it comes to where we are right now, and you have to remember that there were a lot of times the copyrights were shut down altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just shut that whole system down. So we're at the point right now where things that were created in 1929 and before are in the public domain. So like The Great Gatsby is in the public domain just recently, just in the last 2 years, I think, for Gatsby. And we actually, when we started this show, Retro Rangers, we played Steamboat Willie.
I was just thinking about Mickey
because it was brand new. This year, Popeye the Sailor is in public domain. But a lot of times these copyrights can be reclaimed or claimed at a right time. If you try to do anything with Tarzan, good luck.
Really? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate will come after you and put you down in the dirt. Now we have right. So actually, Raphael looked this up. Everything copyright free as of January 1st, 2025 goes back to 1929. Yeah. And Diana J. Brody says, according to Perplexity AI, it's author's death plus 70 years. So in my lifetime, I won't ever be able to write a Nero Wolfe novel.
But it's interesting that we're watching Rex Stout now. I can understand his frustration because obviously it was a lot less accommodating to the artist back then.
Yes. And that's rough, but it's because it's very commercial to say, okay, now someone else gets to play with your world. Someone else gets to use your characters. DJB also says, if it's a work made for hire or anonymous, then it's 95 years from last publication or 120 years from creation, whichever is shorter. Yikes. That's but yeah, I mean, at that point, just make your own character. Just, Fat Dave the detective.
And as Mr. Stout says, how much time do we have to discuss that? Because that is a big ball, can of worms and ball of wax.
Well, and this was a subject that was not only near and dear to Rex Stout's heart as an author in principle, but also specifically with Nero Wolfe. After these first two film adaptations in 1936 and 37 were made, he absolutely hated those.
Yeah.
The changes that were made and the casting was really off. He just did not like it. And there has, to my knowledge, to date, there has never been a Nero Wolfe feature film. And there were some radio adaptations, but the TV shows that have been made were after his death. So it's his heirs that approved those. So he came right out and said that he didn't want any adaptations after his first taste of Hollywood back in the 30s. And he said, my family may decide otherwise, and that's fine, but I don't want to see it. And so being able to protect the integrity of the work, I think, was very important to him in that regard as well.
I think we could jump from here if you wanted to. There is still a very funny subject that they cover, but let's get right to what was going to be our jewel in the crown tonight.
Ooh.
Let's get right to it, and we might come back to this if we have a little time and energy. and that is we are going to watch the unaired TV pilot starring, and I never get his name right, Kurt Kassner.
Kassner, I think, is the closest I can come up with.
Man, I always get it wrong.
Hey, John, at least we're remembering it now. It took us 2 weeks to remember the poor guy's name. I guess William Shatner's too much at the forefront of our brains.
we made Raphael look it up. That's how lazy we were. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Of course, I saw that William Shatner was in it, and I was like, well, I have to see this.
Well, I mean, I'm amazed we overlooked it when we did our chat last year, but
exactly,
as it turns out, it's a good thing we did, I suppose, because here we go.
It pretty much got its own show. So, so all right, let's try this. Okay, Nero Wolfe. This is
Kurt Kassner. I keep saying AR.
Kassner. Who of course we know as the villain. Oh, you know his name, don't you, Joe, from Land of the Giants?
No, I don't. Here we go again. Raphael, help us.
You got it from me earlier. I thought maybe you'd still have it in the old steel trap. But this is from 1959. I'll just take a look at this here. Theme composed by Alex North. 2 additional unsold pilots out there somewhere, they say. Guest star George Voskovec later appeared as Fritz Brenner. Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. George Voskovec plays a guest role in this one. I had no idea.
I have never seen this, so I'm excited.
All right, here we go. It's a Nero Wolfe. It never made it onto television, but we get to watch it right now.
Now, this is the music I would expect.
Oh, stop, Rick.
Yeah.
My name is Nero Wolfe. I work with crime.
Ooh.
Against it.
I love this.
Nero. William Shatner's Archie.
And from Bill Shatner is Archie.
Not Crockett Archie.
Oh, look. It's a computer.
April 6th, Florida.
Must be a good one. It takes with the whole room.
This is the way it happened.
That's how they used to figure out.
This is the way the newspaper said it happened, allowing for 16% lousy reporting, which is normal, and 19% inaccuracy, which is inevitable. This is the way it probably happened.
Starts off with a captain's
The
log.
occasion?
Yeah.
A seventh
it was
attempt
Captain's
to shoot
log.
the moon.
That was very Rex Stouty, though.
Yeah.
These men were doing all the work. These were only the scientists who built the missile.
God, can they get a
Dr.
table big enough
Wolfgang of the Air Force Missile Center. Associate Professor Adams of the Carnegie Institute of Technology. Christian Lowenberg of the Belson Aeronautics Company. Ernest Patchen of the Missile Development Center.
I used to smoke
15,
that.
14, 13, 12, 11, 10.
No special effects.
8, 7, 6.
All off camera.
5,
Make it cheaper.
4,
There's reverb.
2, 1, 0. That's how and when Dr. Christian Lowenberg, missile scientist, died at the precise moment of the takeoff of moon missile number 7.
I didn't even lit a cigarette yet.
Now, I'd be inclined to say on this Monday morning, 6 days later, that we occupants of the private house on West 35th Street, New York City, are about as deeply concerned with the death of Christian Lowenberg as the man on the moon. In the first place, I had a much bigger problem on my hands. Nero Wolfe had a cold.
Nero Wolfe would cover his mouth.
Yeah, good. Tissue. Gourmet cough syrup.
Whereas you was 13 seconds late. You feed a cold on time.
At the start of a fever, we're debating which to do.
Ready to kill me or cure me.
Hornet troll
I'm
here.
horizontal, but I'm not helpless.
Yes.
There we go. There we go.
Only Fritz would think of a hint of sage in a plover omelet.
How true. Well, what do we got here? Oh, look. The Yanks take a game from the Sox.
Good.
All right. Associates in tribute to
Doesn't
Lowenberg,
nibble
April
either,
12th,
does he?
special to the New York Gazette.
What's that, Joe?
See, he doesn't nibble either, does he? Nice big bites.
Hey, it's a half-hour show. He's got to cover some ground.
Oh.
Pole player and sailing enthusiast, as well as one of the world's leading space scientists, collapsed and died last Wednesday at the very moment of the takeoff of the Neptune missile. His death was attributed to heart failure brought on by the strain he must have endured at the very moment of launching. My late husband, Mrs. Lowenberg.
No.
What's the matter?
I dislike widows who call in depressed before the body is cold in the grave.
You want more serious people?
Yes.
Well, how about this? Financial statement of the Wolf household, drawn up by A. Goodwin for N. Wolf and signed in blood.
Oh, there you go.
Schmick, the fact of the matter is, your accounts show that you owe $6,000.
You're ruining my breakfast.
And 98 cents.
$6,000?
And 98 cents.
How's that possible?
There's your Rembrandt etching, shipment of orchids from Bimini.
How many days ago did that moon person die?
6 days, but I fail to see what one has to do with the other.
That the connection between the death of a scientist and our financial affairs remain obvious only to me. It takes genius to see that relationship. There is only one genius in this room at this time.
Okay, I'm just going to stop it right here. Mike, Joe, what do you think of the casting here?
You know what? I'm sorry, Mike, I should let you go first, but mine's going to be brief. So far, I really am enjoying Bill Shatner in this role.
I agree. I mean, I think he, obviously we know him very well from all of his later work, but he is very engaging, I think, and so far so good. I don't know what's going on with with this Nero Wolfe. I mean, he looks like he's wearing a fat suit laying there, so
he's probably tatted.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but
I don't know if you remember him from Land of the Giants, but he was not a stout fellow, if you'll pardon the expression.
I mean, he wasn't, he wasn't thin like Bill is here, but
yeah.
I agree with you both. I mean, yeah, they had to plump him up a little bit because he just doesn't have it in the face. He's not jowly enough.
Yeah.
Agree. And I do have to say that the story is not from Rex Stout.
No moon missiles in Rex Stout novels.
I mean, believe me, there was he got contemporary in various times. Certainly World War II.
Yeah.
Nero decided he was gonna fight more Germans and actually went on a diet, and then worked for intelligence, military intelligence. But then in the late 60s, with all the counterculture stuff happening, there was a storyline that it didn't revolve around, but it kind of ended up with him butting heads with J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Now, before we go back, John, I will confirm for the final time that yes, we are watching the very talented Kurt Kassner who played in Land of the Giants, Alexander B. Fitzhugh.
There you go. There, Alexander B. Fitzhugh.
No wonder we can't remember that.
It's a story in and of itself. All right, back to Nero Wolfe.
What is that in the second paragraph about the dead man's athletic ability? Bless you. Never mind. Take out your pad. These are your instructions for the day. Call the papers and tell them that Nero Wolfe said Christian Lowenberg was murdered.
Murdered?
What?
After you've called the papers, there are certain chores I want you to perform.
The afternoon papers carried it, of course, and carried it big. Out of the several million persons who read the statement, there were precisely 5 whom Wolfe wanted to read it. The first was Professor Adams, who sat next to Lowenberg when he died. The second was Dr. Ernest Patchen, who sat on Lowenberg's left. Number 3 was Dr. Wolfgang, who also sat on the panel that day. The fourth party Wolfe was interested in was the widow of the deceased, Mrs. Christian Lowenberg.
Oh, it was her.
I went to see the fifth party personally, because Wolfe wanted a first-hand report on his reaction.
He worked at Cmdr Brothers in Wall Street. Oh no, I guess he is at work. Okay.
Is there a Mr. Belson, or is that a fancy trade name like Stanley Steeman?
There is a Mr. Belson, but if you don't have an
You take
appointment...
this specially engraved card, $7.50 a 100, and tell Mr. Belson that a perfectly fascinating young man wants to see him about Dr. Lowenberg.
Dr. Lowenberg? But
He's dead. That's right. But don't let that worry your pretty little head.
Oh, fresh.
Go on.
No touchies unless people.
Funny thing about that receptionist, when she left the room, she was beautiful.
Oh, God.
When she came back, she was only cute by comparison.
Well,
I'm Leslie Gear.
Oh,
Mr.
this is
Belson's
the real
assistant.
dame.
He needs that kind of assistance.
What can I do for you?
Take me in to see Mr. Belson.
Mr. Belson is very busy.
Miss Gear, let's not engage in a duel of wits. Tell the busy Mr. Belson that Archie Goodwin is here to see him. And Mr. Goodwin is Mr. Nero Wolfe's prime minister.
Nero Wolfe? Come with me.
Oh, in that case.
I've always been an admirer of Belson Aeronautics. Ever since I've been a little boy.
Poor receptionist.
I think if people put out a damn fine propeller. Airplanes are terrible, but you sure put out a dandy little propeller.
I got to say, if we could pause for just a second.
Yeah, I got a sec.
Come in.
Yes,
You know, it's really hard to watch this and not think of Airplane 2. I mean, just some of the lines. It's not the storyline at all. It's just the way he's delivering it, and the fact that it's Shatner just makes it feel like it's a Leslie Nielsen style. You know, I'm playing this farce straight kind of thing, and it comes off a little bit funny.
I mean, it was brief, but did he break the fourth wall just now back at the receptionist desk?
Did he?
If it is, it was quick.
I mean,
a little sly wink, toward the camera.
Honestly, William Shatner is one of the most winking at the camera guys ever. There are times during Star Trek where I'm like, I can't believe they went with that take, because he can be so twinkly with the eyes.
I keep also waiting for him to suddenly run into Edith Keeler in the City on the Edge of Forever episode.
Let's get back to it and enjoy a little more of that Shatner charm. Sorry, I hit the wrong button, and there we go. Well.
What do you want?
Work for Nero Wolfe?
Yes, sir.
What does he mean saying that Dr. Lowenberg was murdered?
Dr. Lowenberg worked as head of the missile development for this company, did he not?
I'll answer questions when you answer questions. Who hired Wolfe to find out if Dr. Lowenberg was murdered?
Who hired Wolfe to find out who murdered Dr. Lowenberg is the correct way to phrase that question. The correct answer is... I'm not at liberty to say.
Then get out. If Wolfe wants answers, tell him to come and get them himself.
Nero Wolfe hasn't left his house since that time I threatened to leave for the FBI. Staying home was one of his little eccentricities.
Another is sending rude young men to ask us stupid questions for him.
At which point I'm supposed to say, oh, come now, Mr. Belson, can't we...
Get out of here!
Under skin. Give him a Captain Kirk kick.
Oh, don't bawl her out for letting me in. She was helpless in the presence of charm.
She is strangely intrigued.
That's fresh. I came, I saw.
The orchid and I are listening to Scarlatti. I have no proof, but it seems to me that Scarlatti improves the color shading much more than any prelude by Chopin.
What happens when you play rock and roll?
Don't be obscene. What did you find out in the library?
Well, his name is Dr. Christian Peter Lowenberg, aged 43, time of death, born Dusseldorf, Germany, educated various technical institutions.
What did you find out it was not and who's who?
I conned the city library. I perused several magazine articles, and I found that this Lowenberg once worked for a man by the name of Goering, Herman. They were building a rocket to shoot across the English Channel, a ridiculous idea. Anyway, I found that this
there it is.
Lowenberg was never a big shot in Germany. He was always an assistant to somebody else's assistant. He once worked for a man by the name of Wolfgang.
Go on.
Well, the war is over, and this rat race begins between us and Russia to find out who could come up with the most German scientists. We get Wolfgang for our Air Force, and he brings Lowenberg over with him as his assistant. But this Lowenberg must have been a smooth talker, because within about 6 months, he had talked himself out of the Air Force and into this cushy job with Belson Aeronautics as head of their missile division.
Anything else?
Well, he had beautiful baby blue eyes, according to one awestruck female feature writer. He must have had some muscle, too, because he was a cracked fencer, a devil of a fellow in a sailboat. He was deaf in one ear. He got that way from playing polo on accident.
I take it that's all you can come up with now.
Well, it's a synopsis. I'll type up the details. Anybody call?
Yes. Dr. Adams, Dr. Patchen, Dr. Wolfgang, Mrs. Lowenberg, and Mr. Belson.
All screaming over the phone, no doubt.
Demanding who, just who, has retained me in this investigation.
Did you tell them it was Mr. Figment?
No.
Figment.
I told them I would divulge the name of my employer tomorrow night in this house at 9 o'clock sharp.
But, Mr. Wolfe, how can you do that?
Never mind. I need 24 hours before the mob descends upon me. Take out your pad.
Mike Sauter.
This plays like Data playing Holmes in the holodeck. It's like boom, boom, boom. You know.
Mike Sauter, does this seem traditionally Nero Wolfe to you, that he would be this provocative, kind of running a scam here, making people think he was hired when he in fact was not?
Yes, he would often have charades, but this would only be the Stoutian, fully Stoutian, if he already knows who the killer is, because he wouldn't just get everybody together and say that he's going to announce the killer unless he actually has a pretty damn good idea, which he might in this plot. And I just to circle back about Shatner, I'm really enjoying his performance. I mean, he does. He's really selling me on his wittiness.
Yes.
Which you know, Archie Goodwin has to be, and he's doing a great job of it, I think.
I agree.
I agree as well. All right, here we go back into the story, everybody. This is really good. I'm enjoying this.
First, there is an object I want you to find out about. It's in the funeral parlor, or in the coffin, or in the city dump by now.
Oh.
Perhaps you can guess what it is.
Oh, now that looked like it was a fourth wall break.
I've never had such Tommy rot in my life. How dare you go down making my
Whatever.
Then let me state the case another way. Dr. Lowenberg died, to use what is to me a rather vulgar colloquialism, at the final stroke of the countdown. The moment of death is important because it seems to have led a lot of people to assume that as the tension grew during the countdown, so did the strain on Dr. Lowenberg's heart, until, like a dam, strained beyond its normal capacity, it burst. Emotional excitement, usually a logical explanation of a heart attack. I ask you, however, to consider one annoying fact. Dr. Lowenberg was an athletic man. He played polo, he fenced, he sailed boats.
Sure had a strong heart.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, athletes do die of heart attacks, true. But they do not die of excitement.
All right, then. He didn't get the heart attack from excitement. He got it from any one of 100 purely physical reasons. So what?
At the exact moment of the takeoff, Dr. Patchen, middle-aged athletes die of a heart attack in their office, on the street, in bed, or at any unforeseen ordinary moment. They do not die at that torturous split second when a voice through a microphone says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Life does not write such cheap melodrama unless it is so manipulated. Which is why certain parties have seen fit to retain me to determine how Dr. Lowenberg really died.
Again, lying.
Okay, so we finally get to it. Who is hiring you, Wolf?
You, all of you.
What's she an utter
You're out
nonsense,
of your
I tell you
mind.
that. I never heard of you until yesterday.
You are more fortunate than most, madame. I make this guarantee. I shall bring the murderer or murderers to justice in rapid time. If the police should beat me to the solution, you'll pay nothing.
What do you mean, pay?
My fees are exorbitant.
You're also a fool. I never heard anything so preposterous.
One point seems to have eluded all of you in the general hysteria of the moment. I, Nero Wolfe, have stated categorically that Christian Lowenberg was murdered. I'm not a crackpot, a sensationalist, or a paranoid publicity hound. I'm Nero Wolfe, and I have some standing in my profession. Only a fool would call me a fool, Mr. Belson. You've already seen what the newspapers do when I state an opinion. I say a man was murdered, and millions of people in this country are convinced that it was murder because I, Nero Wolfe, said so. Very well. Whether you know it or not, soon the police will be knocking at your doors. All of you knew the deceased. 3 of you were within murdering distance when he died. Surely you must realize that by now, all of you are under suspicion of murder.
Oh, goodness.
You will remain under this dark cloud until the true murderer is being brought to justice. You can ask the police to do it for you, which would be messy, inefficient, and time-consuming. You will suffer acute physical, business, and even social embarrassment for a long time to come. On the other hand, I guarantee to solve the case for you quickly, efficiently, if expensively.
He never leaves his house.
Well, how much? A gauche question, but a good one. I have here an agreement of retainer. Mr. Goodwin will distribute carbon copies.
Carbon copies.
It is, I assure you, as legally binding as the day is long. And here I have a list of your individual contributions to my fee. The amounts are prorated according to your individual incomes.
Incomes? You've been prying into my personal affairs.
I have, Mr. Belson. Business is business.
A little slight.
This phrase here, to deliver the guilty party within the shortest possible time. On cold numbers, just what do you mean by the shortest possible time?
I mean the shortest possible time.
Is that E.G. Marshall in the back? Who is that guy?
Kind of looks like him.
I think that might be Voskovec.
Oh.
It's a fair figure, Dr. Adams. On a pro rata basis, eminently fair.
Anti-hero. Oh. That's a lovely neckline.
Trying to distract Nero, but it didn't work.
You got me down for $7,000, and you've got him down for $150.
At the risk of sounding offensive to Dr. Wolfgang, I feel that you will miss your $7,000 less than he will feel the pinch of contributing $150.
Oh, I thought it was $150.
Besides, you can contrive to make it deductible, can't you?
Just sign the contract.
All right. I'm speaking now as your employer. Put up or shut up. Just when do you come up with a solution to this so-called murder?
Now, sir. Right now.
What?
Will you be kind enough to take your place? Archie?
You were right, Mike. I already had the solution.
I think original pair William Shatner is really special. He's got something.
Fortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are fellow members of the only civilization in the history of the race that can raise the past from the limbo of the dead. We don't call it a miracle. We call it motion picture film. Ready, Archie?
Motion
Ready, Mr.
picture
Wolfe.
film.
We will
He's
dispense
also
with
AV
the
Club.
sound. I will supply my own.
Oh, hope it's a smoker.
I make no pretense at understanding what goes on here.
Now, who's the director and choreographer that took this?
Yeah, we've seen this
Now
footage
we're
too.
I talked to the producer and he allows me to use the B-roll. Speaking of which, Mike, what do you think about the accent that our friend Kurt is using as Nero Wolfe?
It's very interesting because I never really thought about it before. There is some dispute about where Nero Wolfe was born. In some novels, he says he was born on U.S. soil, but most commonly he is from Montenegro. So there is, he's never portrayed as having an accent in the books, but it does make logical sense. I can't really fault them for making that choice.
It also, it's 1959, so the whole sense of someone being foreign makes them a little more enigmatic, a little harder to read. So I wonder if that was part of the decision-making process too. I like it. I think it makes him, not a normal person, and it makes Archie seem more normal. All right, here we go.
Familiar territory. I'm sure you gentlemen need no introduction to yourselves. I ask you to notice above everything else the hand of Dr. Lowenberg. Sound, Archie.
I'm watching carefully here.
0. Enough, Archie.
I love Pocky is a interesting translation of that. Well done, closed captioner.
I propound a simple riddle. Why did Dr. Lowenberg reach in his pocket? At the sound of 1, the deafening roar of the takeoff begins. Dr. Lowenberg heard the sound coming up, so he put his hand in his pocket to turn his hearing aid down.
So what, Mr. Wolfe? So what?
Very well put, sir. Archie. The late Dr. Lowenberg's hearing aid. Where did you get it? What does it matter? It is here. Mr. Faversham, if you please. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Faversham is an engineer employed by the Acutone Hearing Aid Association, manufacturers of this. Mr. Faversham will favor us with a few words.
At Mr. Wolfe's request, our laboratory spent last night and this morning examining this particular model. First, we found that somebody had completely reversed the mechanism.
What?
That is, in this particular model, when the amplification is turned up, the sound will go down. And if it is turned down, the sound will go up. That isn't all. Cleverly concealed within the case.
Thank you, Mr. Faversham. I will take it from here.
I guess that is all.
Many of you scientific gentlemen could have reversed the mechanism, but not every one of you could have done one other thing. That needed a very special knowledge. Now, this particular aid contains an astonishing gadget, no bigger than a thimble, though Mr. Faversham informs me that it can magnify the frequency of sound to such high degree, so high that it could shock the nervous system and paralyze the action of the heart. Now, take the horrendous sound of the missile takeoff and magnify it with this maniacal device and burst it into the human ear, then you have the sound that kills. Sound that killed Dr. Lowenberg.
Okay.
Now, who would know about such a device? I've here a book,
some logic here.
The Story of Nazi Science. On page 122, there's a reference to an invention, the explosive. It says no bigger than a thimble, and yet it could amplify sound to such proportions that when it was tested on prisoners of war, it killed some and drove the others insane. The name of...
Okay.
Wow.
So a sonic death ray. Okay. Well, it is a half-hour mystery show, so sure. And I'm sorry.
Well, it's Nazi science.
Nazi science, that's, but I agree. I mean, how do you get the hearing aid, let alone knowing the guy even had one?
Right. You found... Okay.
But hey, there's a few more minutes.
Here is Dr. Eric Hans Wolfgang.
If you're presuming to accuse me of such fantastic...
Why did you do it, Herr Doctor? Were you jealous of the upstart disciple of yours, so much younger, so much more charming, so much more successful in the new world? which puts such a premium on youth and charm and looks. Where did you get it? It would be impossible to... The question is, where did you get it? You could have had this one stolen from Lovenberg and substituted with another one while you worked on it. Now, to steal a man's hearing aid, you could make arrangement with the man's wife, who took it from him while he slept.
No! Never! Not I, never. I know nothing about it. I swear to God.
Tell me where you got it. It would be impossible. Impossible.
Not the wife. No. The wife did not take it from the bedside of the sleeping man. But the mistress could do it. Oh, yes. The mistress could take it.
Hey! Lots of finger pointing.
Why didn't you destroy it? You said you destroyed it.
Oh.
Now it's beginning to make sense.
It's getting very Perry Mason
Dr.
in here.
Lovenberg and Miss Gear working in the same office. The romantic scientist and the lovely assistant to the boss. Why did you do it, Miss Gear? Did the romantic space scientist tell you you're seeking new heavenly bodies?
Should have hit that sooner.
Where did you get it? It's impossible. We destroyed it. Of course you did. This is not Dr. Lovenberg's hearing aid. This is merely a duplicate.
Classic.
Well, who's this guy? An excellent actor, don't you think? Bravo. A magnificent performance, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I enjoyed it myself.
But how did you know that Lowenberg's hearing aid was rigged like that? How did you find out?
Oh, these are merely details. It is late, and I have a
These
call.
are merely plot holes.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may go home now. Be sure that your bank accounts are in good condition. Mr. Goodman will be around tomorrow to collect. Good night. Archie, after you've called the police, ring for some cold beer.
And now a message for cold beer.
So you read between the lines better than any of the other 3 million readers of the New York Gazette. Only you realized that as an athlete, he couldn't have died of overexcitement. What put you on to old Wolfgang?
Well, since he was killed so scientifically, it could have only been a scientist who killed him.
Why Wolfgang?
Sheer elimination. None of the others had ever been involved with high-frequency sound.
And you got all that just from listening to me read the paper to you?
Hmm? Just so.
No, you didn't.
What do you say?
No, you didn't.
You're being impertinent, aren't you?
I am, sir. You had read that story before I got here with breakfast. You had it all doped out even before I got here.
Are you accusing me of...
Yes, sir. I read the story to you. And then you said to me, and I quote absolutely verbatim, Archie, what was that in the second paragraph about the dead man's athletic ability? Now, how did you know that line was in the second paragraph if you hadn't already read the story?
Archie's not so bad himself.
All right, Archie. Got a busy day tomorrow. You have to collect $11,000, the amount due to us, deducting Dr. Wolfgang's contribution of $150, which we can forego under the circumstances.
You're evading the issue.
Whatever you do tomorrow, don't disturb me. I intend to sleep for a week.
That was exhausting.
Please don't interrupt my cold again.
You haven't answered my question.
Good night, Archie.
Good night, Mr. Wolf.
Nothing like a nice beer in a Pilsner glass at bedtime. Oh my, that was something.
Well, I guess this was the era of the half-hour drama as well. Kurt Kassner, there it is. You know, when you think about soon along would come Twilight Zone and you know, several other these black and white dramas. I have no idea who was making this, so I don't know if they didn't have access to the market or what it was, but this looks like a pretty good show to me.
I was going to say, it's too bad it didn't go to series, and I guess it might have deprived us of Captain Kirk had it done so, but
it's possible. It's possible. Oh, hang on. I don't want to let it keep running. There we go. What did you think of that, Michael Sauter?
Well, I I do have to say I really enjoyed the ending. That was very true to the characters. Archie, Nero Wolfe loved his beer, and Archie did drink milk.
Did he? Oh, that's canon.
That's totally canon, and
Oh, no.
and the interchange between them was very accurate. Like I said, this was not an original. I mean, this was an original story. This was not, to my knowledge, based on any Rex Stout story, but it was very true to the spirit of it. Although the prorating the fee for the different people who were hired, who were clients hiring him, that actually was in one of the books. So there is a precedent for that. But I think it was good. I wonder though if, it did say at the end that it was produced in association with Nero Wolfe Attractions or Rex Stout Attractions or something. And so it's possible that this was made contingent upon Stout approving it or something, and maybe he didn't feel that it was up to snuff. I don't know what the machinations were to get this made, because as we discussed earlier, that after the initial 2 feature films in the 30s, there wasn't a visual adaptation until after that saw the light of day until after Stout died. So I'd be curious to find out more information about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm going to jump us back to the interview with Dick Cavett, because it will bring us to a subject that I found very interesting. Now, thank you for mentioning it, Joe. I had on my radio show done an episode of one of the radio shows. The episode I played was The Amazing Nero Wolfe. There's only one copy of that show still in existence that we know of. And when older people die, go through all their recordings. They may be hoarding radio shows. That's something I could tell people as a member of this hobby. Francis X. Bushman played Nero Wolfe in that episode that I played, and unfortunately my microphone was not functioning correctly for that show, so I'm actually thinking about pulling that show that I did, Web of Mystery. I'm thinking about redoing that, because my little snarky talky parts were so badly mic'd. But it was a pretty good episode. Hang on, I want to see where we are in this.
While you're doing that, John, I just want to make one final comment about the pilot. And we'll never know for sure, of course, but it seems pretty obvious that this was a successful pilot in terms of it seemed to me like it really laid out the groundwork for what the series would be. Prologue, legwork, mystery explained and solved, epilogue.
Yeah.
That's a format that in 30 minutes, I think would have brought people back week after week.
It does have it kind of, in a way, I was thinking that it prefigures the structure of Law and Order, in the sense that which is that you start off with the legwork, and then you end up with the thought work. I guess instead of a court of law, it's the kind of detective reveal in the office, because in the first part of it, the initial part is just Archie and Nero Wolfe, and then it becomes kind of an Archie thing, and then at the end, Archie just kind of fades from it.
Isn't that interesting, though, the idea of the procedural? That you show the legwork, you show the investigation and being shut down by witnesses, and getting bits and pieces of testimony that you have to put together. It's really interesting that they did cover that pretty well. I mean, obviously it's a very low budget production, but pilots don't usually have very much money to work with, so frequently the money arrives after you get picked up. This might have been a syndication show too, so that would make it a little harder to get on the air. There's a lot less money when you're not involved with a studio or with a network.
And also interesting I found is that it seems to be one of the few like dramas, half hour or otherwise, and in 1959 or maybe for the decade following, they would even touch anything that's Nazi themed in any way.
Right.
I mean, that's 15 years later. That's not long.
Right. Yeah, it is very strange to be in our age range. I mean, I'm the oldest of everybody here, except for a couple of the old duffers, a couple of the geezers in the chat, but who feel free to get very angry at me and say something. But yeah, I mean, it was weird growing up with Hogan's Heroes on TV almost all the time. McHale's Navy, although a lot of that was about fighting Japanese in the Pacific. But World War II really loomed large for us in the 60s, and I would even say in the 70s. You got your Baa Black Sheep, your Operation Petticoat. So yeah, I wonder about that. I mean, it's so funny that it's such a triggering issue now in the 2020s with people going, I don't know, is it such a big deal? Yeah, it is.
I know. I'm going to go to the library and see if I can take out the big book of Nazi science and see if there's anything instructive for today's world.
Oh, well, Mike, you may have just incriminated yourself, so be careful when you commit your hearing aid murders.
Oh God. All right. Let's I can't find automatically where we dropped off out of this interview, so I'm gonna have to skip around a little bit. You
were about a little bit more than halfway.
A little bit more than halfway, right? Yeah, let's try that.
Copyright will be not forever, as the
theory that
suppose you
and what?
Ooh, hang on a second.
One is that
Eartha's saying something.
Yeah, Eartha Kitt's going to throw something into the conversation. Let's have a listen.
Copyright will be not forever, as the table or chair or house would be, but for the life of the author plus 50 years.
Seems fair.
And that's the most important single thing in what we are after in the revision of the copyright law.
Sure.
Are you aware of the theory that, I'm sorry, Eartha.
I was going to ask, suppose you write a book like we were talking about before, and certain parts of the book is censored, and then you want to republish the same book again. Could you do that under another name? And then there just some of the story parts of the story is different.
You mean, would you still own the copyright?
Yes.
Oh, yes, because the original copyright would cover that. Sure, you could.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
You do that, Eartha.
I love that so much. Well, they censored my book. And Rex Stout's like, well, you go get him, girl.
Try it once.
Okay.
Are you aware of the theory that's made the rounds that...
Well, I'm saying that's here.
I'm sorry, Joe, what was that?
I'm stepping all over it, but I'm saying she's running late for her other talk show appearance today with Lily St. Cyr.
We watched Mike, last week we watched the Gypsy Rose Lee talk show, and Eartha Kitt was on that, so she's game to be on your talk show.
Yeah, she's everywhere.
Maybe she'll be on our show.
Oh, if only.
Nero Wolfe is the illegitimate son of Sherlock Holmes.
That has been said, yeah.
You mean I didn't think that up?
I meant it's been said by you.
Oh, yes, just now. So that's where I heard it, eh? Yeah. There's no truth to this, I hope. Although it could be possible, couldn't it? Because after the Reichenbach Falls, or whatever it was, Holmes was not seen for a while.
I suppose, but I just don't know. I wasn't there that night.
No? Well, I have evidence that he was in a motel with Irene Adler.
I thought so. Oh, goodness. Well, you can be sure it wasn't a motel because there weren't anything.
There wasn't even an Irene Adler. I made that name up.
Right.
Well, there was an Irene Adler. We're going to hear from her descendants.
Speaking of Sherlock Holmes, there's an interesting little fact about him that has some bearing on whether mystery stories are a minor form of literature. Of all the hundreds of thousands of characters that have been created in fiction in the last 300 years, both in the drama and in the narrative, in novels, by far the best one known all over the world is Sherlock Holmes.
Is that so?
Well, it's too bad that stories about him aren't literature, isn't it?
Yes, I think they're going to have to be redefined.
We'll just have to grin and bear.
You wrote a book once in which the actual FBI figured, and J. Edgar Hoover, and used all the.
This is what you were referring to, Mike, right?
Yeah.
Names and people, and I know the FBI is very conscious of its image and what's written about it and all. Did they cooperate with you in the writing of this book?
And J. Edgar Hoover wrote it.
Go on.
No, did they cooperate with me?
Mm-hmm. I mean, did you?
Well, obviously you haven't read the book, or you wouldn't ask that question.
I thought I'd trap you by painting myself into a corner. No, I haven't read the book. My copy was stolen on the subway. How do you like them apples?
They went around stealing them all over the country.
It really was. It was a friend of mine found it. It's got a green cover and paperback. I started it, and it was taken on the IRT. In fact, I've been taken on the IRT a couple of times. What's the name of that one?
The Doorbell Rang.
Right. I'm reading the one now about the lady who's looking for her father. What's the title of that?
Naturally, it's called The Father Hunt.
That's right. Just wanted to see if you knew.
That is William Holden, right?
He must have been the number one guest that night.
I mean, he's usually the top guest about this time.
Her father. What's the title of that?
Naturally, it's called The Father Hunt.
That's right.
I'm sorry. I'm just so proud of myself for recognizing William Holden.
That's him.
Are you interested?
William Holden and Rex Stout going heavy on the bronzer.
Well, they probably had the same makeup girl that night. They probably sat in the same chair.
I'm going to admit some more stupidity on my part.
Yes.
When Mr. Stout first walked out, I think, was he African American? Because I picked up on that bronzer when he walked out.
He is well, those are hot lights, so I imagine they are really taking them shades that they wouldn't put on you nowadays.
220 house plants, and only 10 of them are orchids.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I have anything against orchids, but they're just orchids.
I love the pronunciation of orchids.
Orchids,
yeah,
and
much prettier though.
And yeah. Well, now wait a minute.
Well, I'm thinking of those ones in the subway.
Oh.
The orchids, I mean, not the wimp. You know those orchids you get in the subway, and they've put glitter and false diamonds on them and all of that.
Who gets orchids in a subway?
Dick is in a corner. He doesn't know how to get out of it.
The question is, who gets orchids in the subway? Winos on their way to a prom. I don't know.
That's a good one.
Oh my God. Oh, I can amuse myself endlessly. We'll be back after this message.
I love the response of, did the FBI cooperate? Well, you know that if you read the book. So clearly they didn't.
That was not a flattering portrait of the FBI.
That's funny too, because the FBI does figure into a bunch of things that I've covered on the radio shows. Because originally there were radio shows about the FBI that were almost impossible to do because J. Edgar Hoover was so uncooperative. And then when he did have shows that he worked with, like FBI at Peace and War and This Is Your FBI, they were terrible shows because they were made according to how he thought a show should be made. But one of his failed shows became Gangbusters, which is one of the greatest radio shows of all time. So J. Edgar Hoover's bad instincts did create some good shows. I also feel the necessity, since I have a Pennsylvania resident on screen, to say Kansas City and the Philadelphia Eagles are in the Super Bowl.
Well, there we go. Big shocker.
Sorry about your Steelers.
Well, that was a foregone conclusion. I feel bad for the Bills and the Bills fans.
The Bills fans are snake bit. Do you remember the X-Files episode where the cigarette smoking man is given a bunch of decisions to make, and one of them is who is going to win the Super Bowl? And somebody says, is it going to be the Buffalo Bills? The cigarette smoking man said, as long as I'm alive, the Buffalo Bills will never win a Super Bowl.
Which was coinciding with or immediately after the period when the Bills went to the Super Bowl 4 consecutive years and lost all of them.
Exactly right.
Heartbreaking.
And of course, Chris says, I thought orc kids were from Tolkien. Speaking of our Raphael card-carrying geezer, thank you. And when I mentioned geezers, Chris said I resembled that remark. Pretty much at the end of the show, Mike. What do you think about the Sherlock Holmes is the illegitimate? Sherlock Holmes is the father of Nero Wolfe, who is the illegitimate son of Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler. Anything? I mean, clearly Rex Stout does not seem to mind that theory.
No, I mean, why would he? It's just, any kind of, conversation starter buzz about Nero Wolfe is only good for the books, but and all the stories. But I think that indirectly you can say that's probably true, in the sense that clearly Nero Wolfe as a character was influenced by Sherlock Holmes. So Stout, I think, cribbed some ideas from Sherlock Holmes when crafting the character. I think it's an interesting fan theory that goes way back in at least into the 50s. The Sherlock Holmes fanatics came up with that and circulated that. It goes even farther than that. There's fan theories that, so there's a restaurant. So Nero Wolfe never left his home on business, or rarely left his home on business.
Yeah.
But he would leave to go various places of his that weren't business. And once a month he dined at a restaurant in New York City called Rusterman's, which was run by his oldest friend, who was also from Montenegro. Including, at some point, of course, there was the inevitable novel when like his friend got murdered and he had to solve that crime. But there's a theory that that this friend was actually Nero Wolfe's twin brother, and that Archie is this guy's son. So he is actually Nero Wolfe's nephew.
Okay. Now that's a great theory.
And I think a lot of it springs to there's one book in which Nero Wolfe tells Archie, just kind of apropos of nothing in the story, he says, do you know I'm an uncle, Archie? He says to him, and it's a very funny line if that was true,
right.
But it's a little bit, it doesn't really have a place otherwise. But I think it's there's no. It's an interesting idea that people came up with.
Joe, let me ask you, as a writer, do you find there to be like no shame in the game, or is it a little derivative? On the other hand, a little derivative to base a character on the most famous detective of all fiction. Is there any judgment that you pass when you go, well, Rex Stout was really thinking a lot about Sherlock Holmes when he created this brand new character? What do you think of that?
I think there's absolutely no shame in that. There is inspiration, which is what you're referring to, John. And there's out and out, plagiarism. We don't go there, of course. We don't want to if we're truly creative. So no, not at all. I mean, inspiration comes from a lot of places. A lot of my inspiration comes from my favorite author, Stephen King, as well as others. Yeah. And you can see some similar elements in terms of the approach, and so forth. But ultimately, it's your own. And I think there's ideas that of mine that were great, if I can be so non-humble for a moment. And that might have not seen the light of day had it not been for certain inspiration. So no, I think that's just fun.
Yeah.
And I think that in discussions about fair use, There's always a notion about if a work is transformative at all. If you just clone a character, then that is just, it's just shameless, and you shouldn't go there, and that can get you in legal trouble. But if you take inspiration from a character and transform it into something new, then there's nothing wrong with that, because most art is in response to other art. There are very few people who start from, David Lynch, perhaps notwithstanding, there are very few people who do something that just kind of springs out of their own brain. It's usually just synthesizing something new based on inputs from a couple of different sources. So I don't see any problem with it. And by the way, it is described in the books. There is hanging on the wall of somewhere in the office of Archie and Nero Wolfe, there is a portrait of Sherlock Holmes.
A very nice tribute, I would say. That's
absolutely. And to put my my philosophy about this in a different way, if upon my inevitable demise that my work has reached a level where somebody else is inspired by it, and maybe even carries some of those characters and their situations further, what an everlasting tribute. So
yeah, I can see that as well. One of the things that I found funny is that the Nero Wolfe fans refer to the body of work as the corpus. There seems to be kind of a secret decoder ring carrying group of Nero Wolfe fans out there. Mike, have you ever considered yourself a member of the fans? Or?
I mean, not really. I've never gone. I've never really connected with others. This is probably the most I've ever done, besides reading the books, seeing the adaptations, and actually talking about it with other people. So I'm not really in that league. I will say that I do have. There is an author who made a book. It's like a guidebook to the whole Nero Wolfe corpus, although it was actually written before. There were still books that hadn't yet been written when that was published, in which, they put together all of the biographical information of the characters and the backstories, and try to pin things down and discuss in detail the whole Sherlock Holmes as Nero Wolfe's father theory. But there also is a cookbook. There in all the books, there was a lot of very specific gourmet meals being prepared as part of the story, and they were all, Rex Stout cooked them all to make sure that everything worked, and so they eventually did make an actual Nero Wolfe cookbook. I don't have that, so I haven't gone that far down the rabbit hole.
It would be
what a great thing there, where Rex Stout actually cooked the dishes to make sure they were authentically Nero Wolfe. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that means at some point he cooked starlings.
If it's in the cookbook.
It's from Golden Spiders. At the very beginning, he's going to eat starlings, but Fritz has changed the recipe. And he's furious and does not want to eat the starlings now. But
oh yeah, when I was a kid, like I would not have known anything about shad roe, or there's various food things that are mentioned in these books that were not part of my world. So I learned some things there. Shallots. To this day, I'm not sure what a shallot is. I've had shallots, but they're frequently mentioned in Nero Wolfe recipes.
Some things are best left unquestioned. Just put it that way.
Shallots are delicious. They are a sweet version of an onion. There's a little, they're an alum. They're a little bit of a cross between garlic and onion, especially thinned, very slicely thinned. Thinly sliced. Anyway, it's time to end the show.
The only thing I can tell you about shallots is I did try to prepare them in a recipe once, and Oh my God. You think an onion is bad, but you get a little shallot juice under your fingernail and
ooh, ouch.
You are in pain for quite a while.
Oh my goodness.
John, I'm hearing, I've got an inspiration now for future merch. I think the Retro Rangers cookbook is guaranteed.
Do it.
Hot dogs with Hormel chili on it. Yeah.
Speaking. Okay. All right. We're at the end of the show, so I'm going to tell a Mike Sauter story.
Oh, great!
It is. I think charming and sweet. But Mike, if you are angry that I tell this story, I certainly understand. So Mike and I were college disc jockeys, and we used to borrow people's apartments during Christmas break and spring break, but Christmas break was a big one because it was long, and we would borrow people's apartments. And so I went over to the apartment where he was staying, and he was preparing some food. I think I'd already eaten, he was just preparing his own food. And so at the time he was still eating meat, but Mike has gone vegetarian and vegan many years since, many decades since. So Mike, you were preparing a bowl of baked beans and you had hot dogs.
Yeah.
And we're talking, while you're cooking, and you're like, and you took a hot dog and you went, and you,
oh no.
And another hot dog. And so that's how you cut your hot dogs. And I have to tell you, I still do that to this very day.
I mean, why take the time to slice them with a knife?
I thought you were mimicking something else. I'm glad to hear it's this.
Yeah, that'll be a whole different story.
And believe me, he wasn't trying to make it sexy. It just happened to be sexy.
Sounds sexy now that I know what the actually were depicting.
But instead, because it's like, well, it's my food. I'm not sharing it with anyone else. If it's in my mouth and then it goes into the food and then I cook it and heat it up, there's nothing gross about that.
No,
exactly.
Well, if I may just momentarily share two brief things.
Yeah.
I stayed with one of my cousins for a while, who unfortunately has since passed away. But it would gross her out so much if I make a sandwich and put the mustard on with my finger. I said, I'm eating it. I'm not making it for you. The other thing is, I discovered way back in college when funds were tight, and we're talking about great food and gourmet dishes, and the perfect way to cap that off, in my opinion, is what we did one time. We had my buddy and I had $5 between us, just enough to get a half gallon of vanilla ice cream and a jug of wine, and make wine floats. That was
fun on a budget, folks.
Oh yeah.
Coming up this week, Joe and I will welcome yet another friend. Eric Kramer will be joining us on Tuesday night. Retro Trekkers. This is Trek Flicks and Chill. Great title. Thank you, Joe. That was fantastic.
You're welcome, John. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Joe made that up. We will be watching and examining, recapping and reviewing Section 31, the made-for-TV movie over on Paramount Plus. It's interesting. It is very interesting. Raphael's already seen it and has let us know. Oh, the pain.
You thought the Deadly Dolls was bad, Raphael.
Boy, we make you go through it, don't we, Raphael? So 7 p.m. on Tuesday night, join Joe, Eric, and me. And hopefully Raphael and hopefully Chris and anybody else who wants to join us, we will be talking about.
Oh, you don't want to miss this one. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun because you don't just feel the pain by yourself. You share it with your friends, and somehow that makes it even better. Yet another great detective. Coming up this week on Mr. Weber's Web-O Mystery, we will be following the gentleman detective who invites you at the end of the show to guess who done it, and he has a panel of guests on each week to take their guesses after hearing the mystery. And I got to tell you, Ellery Queen, yet another incredible detective from American detective fiction. Sauter, have you read any Ellery Queen in your day?
I actually have not. No.
It's a really great world. I have heard some of the radio shows, but having decided to focus on it this week, I really come to absolutely love the adventures of Ellery Queen. So I hope you'll join us as we listen to the man who was murdered by installments.
Love that too. Now, John, will you be able to pause the show at the precise moment where everyone will be able to make their guess before the solution is revealed?
I will 100% do that.
Oh, great.
That's what makes you a great producer, Mr. Townsel. Well done. Well done. The TV version of Jim Hutton with David Wayne was terrific. I would love to watch that. We'll have to see if we could get Jim Hutton's version here on Retro Rangers at some point.
Okay.
Yes, join me Thursday night on Web of Mystery as we listen to Ellery Queen. And then next Sunday,
oh goodness.
Next Sunday, Craig Leuven joins us because next Sunday is February 2nd. It's Groundhog Day. We, of course, cannot show you the film Groundhog Day. That would be too expensive, and we wouldn't be able to do that. But the subject is time loops, and we are going to show you some great clips from Groundhog Day and also from some similarly themed movies that have been made since. Groundhog Day has taken on a whole new meaning thanks to the Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Andy McDowell film. And I guess I should mention Chris Elliott too. But there's lots to talk about, including the gin particles.
Oh,
Mike, you wanna learn about the gin particles?
Okay, that sounds. If I can just interject real quick here, that
Yes.
As a fan of Groundhog Day, I do work in radio, and we did work it out. Maybe this was 6-7 years ago. On February 1st, we played at the radio station I work at, starting at 6 a.m. We played I Got You, Babe, and then, music for the rest of the day. And then on February 2nd, Groundhog Day, without calling attention to it at all, we played the exact same playlist so that everybody tuning in heard the exact same songs at the exact same time.
Did anyone catch it and say anything?
Yeah, some people caught it right away. And because we started to, over the course of that second day, we started to put in little clues, like little IDs with clips from the movie. And it was a whole lot of fun.
That sounds incredible. All right. Well, I'm going to let Raphael lead us out of the show. He says, thanks to the chat. Thank you, chat. Thanks, Mike. Mike Sauter, thanks very much, man.
My pleasure. Mike. Always great.
Thanks so much, Joe. And I accept your thanks as well. And that will do it for Retro Rangers this week. We hope to see you again. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Joe.
That your
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike.
Warm up your TV. Captain John, Cmdr Joe got something to see.
Show us your kitty. My rocket.
We're all back in time to the golden
Hello.
with the Retro Ranger. Oh, it's such a blast. We're flying high with the Retro Ranger. Give it a try and don't be a stranger. Ranger, strap yourself in for a fun-filled flight. Retro Rangers are flying tonight.